Good morning and welcome back to the Roundhouse Rundown, not with Senator Brandt, but this is Brandon Harris, leadership staff for the New Mexico Senate Republicans. Today, I'm joined by Rudy Mora. Real quickly, before we bring him on, he has served over 28 years in New Mexico law enforcement and currently has ongoing efforts working with local and international defense and counterterrorism efforts. So he's a community leader from Albuquerque, and we're glad to be joined by him. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So obviously, we were going to get a law enforcement officer's take on our current crime issue as well as our open border crisis. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and provide some background?
Sure. Again, my name is Rudy B. Mora. Born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on the west side of Albuquerque. I have a long history and family history on my mother's side, dating back to the 1600s, and so I can honestly say on my mother's side, the borders crossed us. We never crossed the border. So we have a long history of culture in New Mexico. I understand the culture. On my dad's side, we date back to the 1800s as well, near Escobosa, New Mexico, which is the East Mountains of Albuquerque. My grandfather, Filomeno Mora, built the church out there. Interestingly enough, in 1910, he was a probate judge in Bernalillo County. And so, we have a long history. My Uncle Santos Baca was a chief deputy with the Bernalillo County Sheriff. My grandfather, Pedro Baca, was a crossing guard in Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office when he was tragically killed in 1968. So we have a long history of public service. I have a passion for it. I went on to become a New Mexico State police officer, served 20 years there. Prior to that was, I've always wanted to be a police officer. But in July 12th, 1989, I was a victim of violent crime where I was shot in the chest with a 45 caliber handgun.
Wow.
And, I quickly realized our criminal justice system fails victims. I almost lost my life on my deathbed, sitting there at Presbyterian Hospital. You 1 minute you have your whole life ahead of you, thinking what you're going to do. I was a junior in high school at West Mesa High School, and thinking, hey, am I going to go on and play football, maybe at New Mexico Highlands, or what? And the next thing you know, I'm sitting on literally my deathbed, fighting for my life. Fast forward that, a few months, and I see the criminal justice system where the person that shot me was convicted of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and served 6 months in the city county jail with work release. So I still remember as a senior in high school, like, here, this guy almost took my life, and he's got a place to sleep and gets 3 square meals a day. And so that was really my driving passion to drive me towards law enforcement. In my whole career, I really strived towards a victim-centric approach to solving crime. And that's one thing that I think here in New Mexico, we still don't do. I went to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's town hall at CNM last week. And again, it's victim after victim after victim, literally serving a life sentence, and where their voices aren't heard. And if the criminal justice system can't include victims of crime, period, you're not going to have a victim-centric approach to solving crime, and you're really not going to get anywhere with that. And so, that's my driving force. I've over the years, I've become a subject matter expert when it comes to border security, cartels, drug trafficking. And what we're seeing here is something that I was an adjunct instructor for New Mexico Tech for many years with their border security program. And we see that, we see a lot of politicians and different individuals saying, oh, teen violence, teen violence. We saw this years ago in 2008 when we were doing our research across the Mexican border, and what we were calling back then was narco culture and junior narco culture. Where we're seeing the junior narcos are young kids that are being influenced by older generation of narcos with their flashy cars, their flashy jewelry,
Oh yeah.
their women, and that's what we're dealing with now. Was that the cartels are very good at recruiting to maintain, I would call it the species of their organization, right?
Sure.
It's not,
Continuity.
yes, they always want to maintain that. Just recently we saw two main drug cartels leaders, captured up here in New Mexico,
That's
and
right.
a lot of people are saying, how were they captured? I'm here to tell you, I've done a lot of research. I've lived the working lines. These individuals know the pressure that was evolving around them, and their livelihood and their lifehood, shall I say, was at stake. And I'm a firm believer they turned themselves in. They can continue to run their cartels through the comfort of their cell, and our prison system allows that. Literally,
Unfortunately.
with
Yeah.
unless there's supermax, which these individuals won't be a supermax, inmate, they can literally run their organization. So this, it's just a passion that I have, a wanting to serve people. I love New Mexico, and I'm just really saddened why we're at where we're at. My grandkids, my children, and we just see. Um, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel for them, Brandon.
Well, for starters, thank you for your public service, as a New Mexican. Thank you, and for a lot of the viewers. And part of the thing I wanted to touch on more is I know you have an extensive background, and your personal motivation for doing this is incredible, and that's why I'm so glad that we have you on today. But what are you currently up to in your continuing effort to make New Mexico safer and a better place for the next generation, your grandchildren?
Well, I want to make a difference when it comes to crime. I've lived it, I've worked it, I've been boots on the ground, and I see where crime is failing our community. So I'm running for New Mexico Senate District 10. I want to make a difference where, I received a letter from the incumbent on what she called her accomplishments, and quite frankly, they just weren't accomplishments in my book. Being a constituent of Senate District 10 and her representing me and my neighbors, so that's why I chose to run.
Wow.
To make a difference, and leave this place a little bit better than when we found it.
Well, that's great. And yeah, that is Albuquerque. It's part of the, let's see, the North Valley. It kind of stretches to the west side of Albuquerque. And it even goes quite down south as well. It's an interesting shape there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It covers all the like you said, parts of the west side there, and then pretty much the whole North Valley. West of 4th Street for the most part. It zigs and zags,
Yeah,
as you mentioned, but
yeah.
all the way through Old Town and even part of the Country Club down by Kit Carson Park.
Okay.
And I'm just so fed up. And I think, in order, as a small business owner, my wife and I have owned a small business for 28 years. And, so we understand what it's like to run a business in New Mexico and try to be responsible and make good decisions, because your employees are counting on you to make good decisions, just like New Mexicans are counting on our legislators to make good decisions. And from what I see a lot of the time is a lot of legislators making decisions and policies to benefit themselves and not necessarily the community. And I have nothing to gain from coming to work up here at the state Senate other than representing the people. And that's one thing I'm committed to doing. When it comes to crime's a big issue. I've been knocking a lot of doors, and I don't care whether you're a Republican, Democrat, independent, everyone is concerned about crime in Albuquerque. And we have to make a change. So that'll be my goal on day one when I'm elected, to make a difference when it comes to solving crime. There's so much that we can do. In 2016, as you know, we all we all voted to pass that constitutional amendment on bail reform. And
Yeah.
I'll be the first to say, you know what? It's failed. It's failed us.
So, continuing on crime, I know it seems like crime all the time. It's a national, obviously, talking point, but even locally here, it's just, we had a recent public safety special session. The governor is really pushing a lot of this crime now, and it's obviously an election is coming up, but bringing it more relevant to us here in New Mexico. Obviously, we both live in Albuquerque, so I think that's unfortunately the epicenter and the hub for a lot of this. But I wanted to kind of pick your brain as to why New Mexico's crime problem specifically, and the driving factors that you've started to touch on, as well as specific solutions to our issue here. Obviously, we know that we've been named the most dangerous state in the United States. That was reported by U.S. News. They did that over a series of statistics as to why that's the case. Number one being our violent crime rate is first in the nation.
And not to mention, just recently coming out, we made the top 20 in the world for the most dangerous cities. So that should be an eye-opener in itself.
So yeah, we have that. I mean, that's just those are grim, yet all too true facts. And I know, even though it's Albuquerque, our biggest shopping mall, a place where families come and get together, it's a fun thing to do. We've had 4 shootings there, most of which by minors, by the way, who aren't able to possess any type of firearm, in the last calendar year at Coronado Mall. And the most recent one was just recently, another security guard was shot by a 17-year-old. So I know you've touched on the youth aspect of things, but it's not just in certain areas of town. This is where families get together and shop and hang out.
Yes, and it's very unfortunate. We're just seeing a systemic problem where, lack of personal accountability, right? There's no I've been fortunate over the last 28 years involved in law enforcement to see all the different theories, right? From broken windows theory to community-based policing to constitutional-based policing. And I'm here to tell you that, there is some truth to probably all those theories, and we need to be able to adapt and improvise and overcome our crime problem. And the only way we're going to do that is, in my opinion, is to change the makeup of the state legislature. Right now we have some very progressive individuals that truly believe, because I've talked to them, they don't believe anybody needs to be locked up. And don't get me wrong, I've arrested a lot of drug couriers carrying large amounts of drugs and contraband on our interstates and highways here in New Mexico. And I'll be the first to tell you that the vast majority of individuals that I've arrested were good people that just made bad choices. So I truly believe everyone deserves second, third, and fourth chances. But at some point, we need to start holding them accountable on these diversion programs that are going on across literally the nation. The most successful places are the ones that have some type of consequence for not completing the diversion program. Here in New Mexico, there's no consequence. If you don't meet your obligation, don't pass your urine test or whatever, okay, they revoke you and they release you back out there, and that's what we're seeing now is, starting with back to like broken windows theory. When you start to not enforce simple things like speeding, red light violations. Mm-hmm. That's why we're seeing the speeding problem and the drag racing with these teens, is there's just no accountability, And then to top it off, we had the whole war on cops, after George Floyd, Eric Garner, a lot of these high profile incidents, yep. Let's face it, as just a few days ago, I follow the Fraternal Order of Police. I'm a proud member of the Fraternal Order of Police, and we have over 220 police officers shot in the line of duty this year. That's ridiculous. And, if we're not going to start holding people accountable and supporting our law enforcement, I've learned in business and in my law enforcement career, which my education is in organizational leadership, people will always be your greatest asset, Brandon. And if people don't feel valued, they don't feel supported, guess what? They're not going to do a good job for you. And that's what our police officers are facing now, where, they're hamstrung by policies, by the Department of Justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where, you know, simply going out there and doing their job. And I'm going to give you an example if we have some time here. A good friend of mine works for the Albuquerque Police Department. I won't mention his name, but he was a very proactive police officer out there looking for crime. And he was on the west side working a graveyard shift one night, and he sees someone stealing from a large auto dealership on the west side, stealing a car. He calls it out, and the guy gets in the car, steals the car. He calls it out. It wasn't even a pursuit. The guy wrecked relatively quickly. A foot pursuit ensued. Long story short, this person, when we got him in custody, arrested him, he had 6 felony warrants, 2 for violent crime, and 4 for stealing vehicles. Okay, so books him in. This guy was out within 24 hours.
That just fails to make any sense.
And it gets worse, Brandon, because he took the guy down. It generated a use of force with the police department. They came out and did their investigation. The officer, while he's chasing this guy, reaches up to touch his body camera to turn it on. It doesn't get turned on. And what does he get? He gets a 40-hour suspension of no. His pay is docked for 40 hours, right? So I'm talking to this guy, and he's literally crushed. He's like, why am I going to go out there and put myself to try and solve crime and make a difference when the guy that shouldn't be out there gets 24 hours in jail and my pay gets docked for 40 hours?
Yeah, he's got a lesser penalty than I do.
That's another thing that we need to start doing here at a very high level, is supporting our police officers, giving them the ability to take care of themselves. As a former undersheriff of Bernalillo County, I was saddened this past year when they had several arrests for their deputies getting in trouble.
Yes.
And, as a former leader of that department, I immediately looked at myself and said, where did I fail these individuals? What could I have done different as the undersheriff? Even though I had been long gone, I still look at it through that lens. And where can an organization support their law enforcement? Because let's face it, law enforcement will see things in their career that no one should ever have to see. And if we're not supporting their wellness, their work-life balance, giving them the tools to be able to deal with that stress, they're no different than any other human being. They're either going to self-medicate, whether it be alcohol or, God forbid, drugs or family issues, and start fighting with their spouses. So there has to be a support system, not only at home, but in law enforcement leaders and our policymakers, to make sure that police officers have the support they need to serve our community to the best of their ability.
Absolutely. And I think that actually plays into one of the issues, and you've been touching on it, is just out of touch policies from people who don't have experience, who they can't even relate. They don't know why things do not work. And in practice, you can firsthand say this works, this doesn't.
Well, and you're exactly right. When I was the chief of police out of the Pueblo of Laguna, I had a legislator, and I'll keep their name anonymous. They were trying to pass some, in my opinion, symbolic gun laws, right? And they wanted to enhance the penalty for carrying a concealed deadly weapon without a permit. And I looked at the law, and I flat out told them, I said, this is nothing but a symbolic law. And they go, well, what do you mean? I go, it's only a petty misdemeanor. I said, and they go, yeah, but it's holding them accountable. I said, let me just give you a scenario here, because I've worked the streets. So say I stop a car and I have reasonable suspicion to go ahead and pat this individual down, right? That's what the law requires me to have, at least reasonable suspicion to be able to pat someone down. I meet that clause. So I pat them down. I find out that they have a concealed firearm and they don't have a permit for. And she goes, yep, you would be able to charge them with a petty misdemeanor. I said, so essentially I'll be able to write them a ticket. Yep. I said, do you know we have a law in the books right now that when I pat the circumstances are exactly the same, I pat them down and I find a burglary tool, whether it's a crowbar or a screwdriver, manipulated in a way so they can break into things. You know, that's a 4th-degree felony. I said, that's where this is a symbolic law. It really means nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because how is it that we can be in possession of a burglary tool and it be a 4th-degree felony, and yet you be in possession of a concealed firearm, a deadly weapon, and it's a petty misdemeanor? Makes no sense.
And that's where the intention of a lot of this legislation, it's out of touch. It's not, obviously we live the experience. It's not working. And so a lot of it is just for demonstration. It's just to, and this isn't, and not everyone's at fault for this, of course, but a lot of it is just, oh, well, we're working on the crime issue. And it's just for the sake of being able to say you've done something. But in reality, we're clearly, we're not trending upwards or better.
And we're not, you know, and we saw where the governor calls a special session for the crime, right? And for me, I'm all for, like, okay, whoever wants to make a difference, I'm willing to collaborate with anyone that wants to make Albuquerque, New Mexico a better place. I'm all for it. But at the end of the day, I kind of sit back as my 28 years in law enforcement and looking at our state statute book, which I think there's one right over here to my right, and there's enough laws on the books. Let's just start enforcing and holding people accountable for those laws. And let's start there, you know, because, you know, we can create all these laws that we're notorious for doing, and it means nothing if there's no funding attached to it. And I'll give you an example. You know, what's been on the news here lately is the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office is getting sued for the shooting that happened at Party City, right? A horrible incident under the red flag law. And just to give you an example, that law came out, but, you know, and I was already the chief of police at the Pueblo of Laguna, so it really didn't apply to me on a sovereign nation, but I still kept up to it because our police officers out there carry what's called a 29-111 commission. It's a cross commission to be able to deal with non-natives on native land. So I still wanted to be aware of that. But I quickly realized that when that law came out, everyone was cheering and fine. Like, I want to keep people safe. I want people to be responsible gun owners. But where's the funding to train the police officers what to do for that? And this, in my opinion, this shooting, this tragic loss of this young lady and her boyfriend could have been prevented had we be better policymakers, better as we're implementing these laws. And I've said this numerous times throughout my law enforcement career. We fight organized crime with unorganized law enforcement and unorganized policymakers, plain and simple. We've seen that across the board. And so what I think I bring to the table is, one, I'll be probably the only New Mexico state senator when I'm elected to have a law enforcement background, boots on the ground for as long as I had, 28 years.
It's true.
So, you know, and let's face it, when you have the majority of legislators here in Santa Fe representing the people, I believe that our legislature, just with any organization, any public organization that's government funded, needs to represent the community they serve, right? And we see that in law enforcement. We need to recruit from all demographics to be representative of the community. I believe our state legislature should be no different. But let's face it, the majority of our state legislators are attorneys.
Yeah, the intention is
there. And nothing against attorneys. They have their job to do, and I respect that wholeheartedly. But in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to serving the people, we need people that represent everyone in the community. And that's what I believe I can bring, a level of expertise when it comes to crime, border security, my experience in small businesses. Those are things that I can easily articulate a perspective of being better at. because I live my life that we don't have to be bad to get better.
That's right.
Looking at all these statistics we have here, it's pretty sad. And but at the end of the day, I'm a very optimistic person. I'm like, you know what? But man, I live in an area where along the Rio Grande River where I can wake up in the morning, I can hear the birds chirping, I can see that beautiful sunrise over the Rio Grande River, and man, we live in a wonderful place,
Yeah,
right?
we
And
do.
and so I want everyone to be able to come together when it comes to solving these issues, all parties aside. Whether I'm sick and tired of identity politics. I really am, because they do nothing but create hate and discontent for the common citizen out there. And I think we need to come together if we're going to change things around in New Mexico. Come together, work together for the common good of New Mexicans.
Well, it seems like, obviously we have our work cut out for us, but I do like the sentiment that the future does look bright. And if we don't have hope, then what do we have? But I do think it starts with people getting informed, as far as, a lot of people are very focused on national politics, right?
Right.
The big presidential race coming
Yeah.
up. But it's kind of funny. In actuality, you should actually be more in tune with the policies and the lawmakers, the decision makers that impact your everyday life, your experience. And that is at the local level. That is, obviously here in the Roundhouse, you've got your senator and your representative. And so I just think that making that more apparent to folks is, listen, all the other stuff is great, but this is what we can do to make our great state and home of New Mexico up to the potential we all know it has, and safer for our young people, our children especially. So
I agree with you 100%. And, it's one of those things where, I try to stay in tune with national politics, but at the end of the day, I'm not concerned with that. Do you think the president or the vice president candidates and any party really cares about New Mexicans? I can honestly say, well, I hope they do. But you know what? I'm concerned about what's going on here, and we can't be sitting waiting what's going to happen nationally to change what's going on here in New Mexico. It's not. It's as a ground up approach. We have our children. I gave a talk to some oil and gas industry folks, and they were a little surprised when they asked me a question. They said, "What do you think is our greatest natural resource?" And they were a little surprised, and I said, "You know what? Our greatest natural resource is our children." And
Yeah.
and they kind of just sat back and nodded. And I said, but with that, I will tell you that everything that we're able to do for our children comes from the oil and gas industry. So, but I stand firmly that our precious natural resource is our children, and we have to give them every opportunity to live the American dream. We can't have them growing up in a society where they're dependent on government. Because I can say this as a former Democrat, I've campaigned alongside a lot of Democrats, and I see them campaign on certain issues, whether it's typically crime, and they get elected, and guess what happens? The special interests override them.
Oh, yeah.
And their policies, the bills that they present aren't to solve crime. It's, in my opinion, it's to keep people dependent on government. And it's not how I was raised. My dad is a Marine. I can't say he was a Marine, because he'd probably give me a slap when I meet him one day again.
Yeah.
But he raised me. He used to talk to me a lot in Spanish and have a lot of Spanish English dialect with him. But he used to always tell me, son, if you want something, you go out there and you earn it. You only deserve what you earn. And if you don't have it, do without it. And that's kind of how I'm raised my kids, and I'm raising my grandkids. That you only deserve what you earn. You go out there and you work hard. I want to teach them the value of a dollar. I want to teach them that regardless of the color of your skin, I can honestly tell you, as being a minority here in New Mexico, Hispanic, that I've never been told that I can't do something. And if I did, I didn't pay attention to it, because no one's going to tell me what I can and can't do. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to work hard. And that's what I want to do for my grandkids, and make sure that
we need more of that.
understand. And here's a philosophy that I truly believe in, and I know there's may come with some controversy with this, but I was always raised that, hey, if you raise your kids right, you can spoil your grandchildren. But if you raise your kids wrong, guess what? You're going to be raising your grandchildren. And I see that happening a lot. I saw that in my law enforcement career, where we're going to houses for when they're needing our help, and there's lots of times there's grandparents raising their grandkids, and it's unfortunate. But we have to make a difference. We have an opportunity with our education system. Man, we're dead last. You know, uh, on everything, and when it comes to the good, and when it's the bad, we're number one. And I'm optimistic that we can change this. It's just going to take a collaborative effort and people wanting to come together for the common good, Brandon.
Well, that's why, we have a tremendous opportunity. You can always say we have all these negative things, but that just means we can do so much to improve, and the sky's the limit as far as what we can do. So this is our starting point. But part of what we do here is exactly bringing that message to people to change the culture, to get people informed and get them motivated. And so that's why it's a tremendous opportunity for us to have had such an amazing community leader as yourself on today, and to help spread that message. So these episodes, we have a new podcast every week, and we'll even tag Mr. Mora's page here so you can go learn more about him. Otherwise, thank you for tuning in. Any last words at all, Mr. Mora?
I do, and I want to let everyone know that the head of the FBI here in New Mexico recently said that our open border is a driving factor when it comes to crime. And, I've worked many years with New Mexico Tech on our border security, working with both sides to do our part. And we need a top-down approach to that border. And I'm going to tell you a story here just real briefly. I was able to go down with some folks down to Texas and see what they're doing with their border, and be able to come back to New Mexico. And what people don't know here in New Mexico is we have a small, probably less than a quarter mile, don't quote me on the exact footage, of border wall that hasn't been completed.
Yeah.
But the panels are sitting there on the side. And with my connections in law enforcement, with the Border Patrol, local police departments in Santa Teresa and Anthony area, what they're telling me is that people are just walking around this border, right? Because it's open. But what the mainstream media fails to tell everyone is that not too far away is a Santa Teresa Elementary School. And the Santa Teresa Police Department is having to send officers to protect the cafeteria workers that are giving the children their free summer lunch program. And facts are fact, right? Facts are facts. This meal is sometimes the only meal these children will get in the day. And to have migrants come across and take those meals, and that we're having to do everything in our power just to protect that should be an eye-opener to New Mexicans, that we have to secure our border. So come this November 5th, please do your research and make sure that your policies align with what your principles and values are, because you can't just sit back and say I voted this way because I always have. You got to change that mindset. You have to look at those incumbents and see what they stand for.
Yeah, and let's switch it up. And so thank you for that. And we learned, Texas told us you can secure your own border. It's not a federal necessarily issue. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Please stay tuned. We have new episodes every Wednesday. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest.